Wow, what an adventure this is. It's so cool that I'm sitting here in my kitchen and I get to talk to people on the other side of the globe. So thank you for coming. I hope I can just sort of ignite your imagination a little bit about how we can build social connections in this time. But what a time it is. I mean, it is a time psychologically that's really tough. I'm 67. I think this has been one of the toughest chapters in my life. The uncertainty, the fear, the occasional anger, just the unknowing is causing anxiety and depression for individuals. But then because emotion is contagious, we're infecting each other kind of with this overall anxiety. So psychologically, it's a really tough time. Socially, it's also a tough time because we don't know when we're going to be together. We're sort of asked to physically distance one another. We know we're supposed to stay away 6 feet, but it's very tough to make that connection work across that physical distance. And technology for so many of us is a brand new.
What?
It's a
Jane got, oh, okay, you're off mute.
It's a really important time for us to be connecting, partly because of the magic of what connection does. It's an extraordinarily powerful booster shot or vitamin that we can take to help us be psychologically and physiologically and socially stronger. So if we look at what these high quality, these moments of short-term interactions, what they do to our bodies instantly, it's extraordinary. They strengthen our cardiovascular system. They make our immune system stronger, which is particularly important now. Our bodies actually elicit hormones like oxytocin that makes us trust people more. It makes us want to help people more. So the instantaneous effects of these high quality connections on our body are really noteworthy. Psychologically, high quality connections are also really important. They increase our capacity to think. They lift up our capacity for resilience. They help us be more creative. They break down boundaries between ourselves and other people. So connections are incredibly important fuel that we need in order to be effective and to be healthy. Socially, when we have these high quality connections, it actually activates what we call pro-social motivation. So even when we're in these short-term 30-second, 1 minute interactions with other people that light us up, it activates a motivation in us to want to help other people, to be kind to other people. So in some sense, it brings out our best social selves. So we might ask ourselves, given the incredible salutary effects of these high quality connections or social connections, what can we do to think about creatively building these connections in this time? And I think it's a couple of things are important to have in mind. First, I think it's important in some cases for us to make the case about why it's so important. I think some people, when they are buttoning down in their homes, their tendency is to not see they can see connection as a drain as opposed to a connection as a strengthener. So it begins in part with appreciating and helping other people appreciate the incredible power of these social connections. Even short-term interactions that we have with even strangers are powerful. The second is to be really planful about the connecting process. And I'm going to suggest that we should think about the connecting process as a process that has pre-work, it has connecting work that actually when we're doing the connection, and it has after connection work. And if we can sort of think of ways to do each of those pieces of the process better, we have a better chance of building high quality connections. So what do we think about, for example, like preparing, for example, to get onto this meeting of 300 plus strangers and hearing talking heads? What could you do to prepare yourself to the pre-work, to till the soil so you're more likely to connect? Well, one thing is to help yourself to be more present to the meeting. So whether, we know there are mindfulness practices and other ways for us to actually show up psychologically so that we can engage people, even if it's through the small squares on a Zoom screen. We also need to have what we call task and material ready. So make sure before you connect, you try to connect that you kind of know the technology, that you have your water, that you have all kind of the materials at hand there so that it doesn't distract you from actually doing the connection. So I think it's important to think about there's things that you can do before you actually get in an interaction, even if it's virtual, that make the possibility of connecting in a high quality way more possible. But let's talk about when we're actually in together in a connection. And I'm going to suggest that there are at least 4 different sort of bundles of practices or things we can think about that actually increase the probability that we can build these high quality connections. And the first is respectful engagement. So how, when we show up on these meetings, and I don't know about you, but I'm almost zoomed out. I've spent the last couple of weeks on Zoom a lot. You know, what can you do in the meeting that actually conveys genuine interest and curiosity about how someone is doing? You probably do care, but in this virtual kind of world, how can you show that you genuinely care? And one very easy way is to think about really good questions, really good genuine questions to ask people. So thinking about that even beforehand is part of the process that you want to have when you're in communion with other people. I think treating other people's time as precious is also an important part of respectful engagement. I think the research is showing that we should only be on Zoom for 45 minutes to an hour before we need a break or some kind of way to sort of pull back from this extensive interaction. And so giving people and obeying kind of time constraints is important. Having ground rules that help meetings run smoothly is a really important part of the connection, and it's a part of doing respect. So making rules about using the video, highly recommended, assigning roles, encouraging inclusion, and for different ways for people to participate. And given that we are in many work settings actually putting people in furlough, sometimes actually letting them go, eliminating jobs on video, means we have to take extra care in offboarding as an important part of respectful engagement. So that's one bundle. What can we do in the interaction, the virtual interaction, that's going to convey respect and worth to each other? And there's lots of things, if you're running meetings or setting meetings up, that can be really important for that. The second is, what do we do to facilitate people helping each other, or what I call task enabling? My colleague Wayne Baker says it's really important, in order to get helping going as a way to build connection, to make it easy for people to ask requests. So oftentimes when meetings begin, work-based meetings begin, when people are doing check-ins, they'll say maybe one appreciation for something that went well the last day or the last week, but they'll also very explicitly say, this is what I need help on for the next week. That's a really important way of tilling the soil for connection around facilitating helping. Focusing on resourcing each other again before you come into meeting or during the meeting, and helping people access resources. I'm on the board of Kelly Services, and I'm really impressed by what our Chief Human Resource Officer is doing in all of the emails that she's sending out in resourcing people and helping them in case they need different kinds of both personal and professional resources. The third bucket of sort of factors or things that we can think about in building connection is about how do you create rapid trust in connections, whether you're doing one-on-one connections with people or you're doing it in a meeting like this. And we know from research that being vulnerable, so providing a safe context for people to display vulnerability, or for the leader of the meeting to display vulnerability, activates trust in the whole group. It's also important to make sure that people are given responsibility and some degree of control for the tasks that they're doing, which is another important way to till the soil for trust that allows for this kind of connecting. And the final bundle to think about is a whole bunch of strategies for how to build connection is actually around play. And boy, do we need a little bit of play now as a way to actually facilitate joy and interest and the kinds of positive emotions that actually resource us. And so I've seen really fun things that people are doing in work meetings, sometimes by the clothes that they wear, sometimes bringing their pets or their children into meetings. There's lots of different ways that we can actually be playful. And for all species, play is a really important way to build connection. So when we're actually doing the interaction, those are 4 different sort of clusters of ideas that we might tap into that facilitate connection. But I mentioned pre-work, sort of the work we do in the actual interaction to build connection, but there's also post-work, or work that we can do after we've met in some capacity. And things like expressing gratitude and expressing appreciation for the meeting or for what we learned or for people showing up, whatever it is a really important connecting action, as well as following through on any promises made or requests that were granted in the meeting. So I think it's helpful to think about connection as more than just a one-shot deal, that there's a pre and the post and the during. So that's really about connecting, doing good social connections when they're planful, when we've sort of planned them ahead of time. But in this world where we're physically distanced from each other, we also need to send out signals to people about when we're available for more spontaneous connecting. Now, as a faculty member, we can do this by telling students about when we have office hours or when we're going to be, available or not. But how are you sending out kind of a welcome mat or a hospitality mat for people to approach you to connect with you? That's something I think that we can usefully think about. Michelle had also asked me just to speak to what we could do to be compassionate in our connections with others. And I'll just make 4 points here. One of the most powerful phrases that we ran into in our work on compassion is this idea that there is always pain in the room. So again, as you go into your breakout rooms, for example, today, or anytime you show up in a meeting, especially during this time, everybody in some way or another is carrying pain or suffering. And everybody is doing it in unique ways. And so just being present to the fact that that's a possibility and holding back judgment and being generous in your interpretations of other people's actions is particularly important at this time as a way to be compassionate. And the other point I'll make about compassion is that we don't have to fix the problems that are causing the pain. Most cases, particularly in this scenario, at this chapter in our life, we can't. These are so much bigger than us. But the power of our presence, our just being there psychologically, even across these kinds of airwaves, which are constrained, is a really important compassionate action. The final thought that I want to leave you with is the importance of being both mindful about connection and curious about how we're connecting and how others are trying to connect to us. I think we have to try new experiments. I don't know about you, but I've sort of felt, especially with this technology, every day is a new adventure. Sometimes things work and sometimes things don't work. But I think having that sort of spirit of, I'm going to try new things. It's worth it because connection is worth it. So I think we need to tap into our imaginative and creative selves in experimenting with new ways of connecting to our fellow humans during these really challenging times. So I hope those are some ideas that can set you off with this appreciative inquiry adventure.